Hello, everyone, and welcome back once more. I'm here with Wendy, and this time round, Wendy, what are we going to talk about?
Well, I became rather fascinated with hearing about your birth story. And I know that you will very kindly and generously share a little bit about that with us today. And I wanted to kind of figure out why was I so fascinated, and you helped me to understand that star seeds all over the planet might find themselves in this situation where they are being sabotaged. So I'd love to unpack with you today, why are star seeds being sabotaged, and how might we recognize that sabotage in our own life experience? Maybe through you very generously also sharing a little bit about your birth story.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's a huge topic in all fairness. So I'm going to dance over a lot of things very quickly. And we can, if you want us to unpack any aspects of it, then comment below and we can go into it. But I've mentioned there is a war on for human consciousness on this planet. There are beings, both human and otherwise, with fallen consciousness that are trying to control, enslave, and effectively own at every level humanity, and take control of this amazing DNA template that we inhabit. And then there are the human beings here, the earthers, and then the starseeds that have come in and have been coming in for a long time to help. Those of fallen consciousness do not want the starseeds here. Why would they? Because they're working, the starseeds are here to work against their interests, or the fallen agenda, shall we call it, for want of a better word. And the fallen races, those of fallen consciousness, have a myriad of ways of making sure that people don't come back to themselves. Because the first fundamental thing that Starseeds are trying to help humanity with is that humanity comes back to an understanding of who they are, their true origins, their true histories, their true abilities, their true potentials. So, and there are lots and lots of ways, and these work against Earthers as much as they work against star seeds. Let's start with drugs. Let's start with vaccinations that are put into babies before they've barely drawn breath. The consequences of that we're seeing playing out around us, chemicals in food, electromagnetic fields that are not supportive of the human electrical. We are electrical beings, electromagnetic beings. Put us in the wrong kind of fields, and you put us in dissonant frequencies that stop us being in alignment with our true frequencies, as it were. We are surrounded by a massive net, and this has been going on. Not recently, this has been going on. We're going back 30,000 years, 50,000 years. There were grids put in place 75,000 years and more, grids around the planet of energies being used, and these grids are used to subvert the natural energies of the earth, the natural flows of energy of the earth, and therefore the natural flows of energy of those beings living on the earth, including us. And I've talked before about this connection between our consciousness and the earth. So there are lots and lots of ways that are being used to sabotage, but starseeds come in for very particular strategies on top of all of those. So there's all of those strategies, poor food, poor water, affecting the environment, educating us. We are, the human brain is, or the human being is designed to absorb information into its field. What it isn't designed to do is to absorb all the wrong information into it, because it's put down in a dissonant field of incorrect frequencies and information, because frequencies, is information. These are information fields we sit within. So you put us down in the wrong information fields, and we're absorbing, and then through the programs, because it's like these big software programs effectively are being run through the earth grids to mind control us, and to effectively put out certain stories, narratives, and those narratives are supported through education, through our society, through structures like the financial system, you know, our religions, our political systems, all of these. So we're surrounded in this net of frequencies and information fields that are detrimental to us, are not serving in our best interests. Starseeds come in to help bust through that and to help put people back in contact with that. Now, they are, you know, as prone to damage from these as humans are, but with the extra sort of DNA stranding and the extra templating and things like this, starseeds have the ability to maybe move out of that field faster or understand faster. And particularly the indigos who have come in, really there's been indigos on this planet now for well over 100 years. And when we say indigos, we're talking about a starseed who has incarnated with the 6th strand of their DNA activated. So, you know, they, in some respects, they're ahead of the rest. They just have to get their 5th strand, their 4th and 5th strands of DNA activated. And some of them come in with the 4th strand activated anyway. So they are potentially dangerous to the fallen consciousness in that once the starseed starts shining its light, you know, magnetically it's going to attract others into its message and its understanding. So they need to be taken down, and there are ways, you know, there are ways to do this, and we see that. I mean, I think a lot of these sort of so-called mental health clinics and things like this are full of starseeds who haven't fully awoken to who they are, or who haven't, even if they themselves might have awoken to who they are, those around them have taken them down, either through ignorance, the family may be thinking that, oh, you know, she needs help, or deliberately, because at a wider level, there's, you know, all sorts of mechanisms out there for sort of identifying a starseed, some of which are actually implanted in DNA. There are things called there's something called tagging. So certain DNA lines who are the starseed DNA lines, as it were, that starseeds may incarnate into. In their etheric body, you can have this tagging that takes place. So when another one comes onto the planet, it sets off an alarm bell in, you know, fallen consciousness headquarters, what I call the forces of darkness within their headquarters, and it's kind of like, get in, you know, stop that soul being effective as soon as possible.
How do they do that? How do they do it? So for me, I'm like, oh my God, could this be happening to me? Like, what can we recognize in ourselves that might be happening when
vaccine damage is a big
vaccine damage? Okay.
You know, again, so many of the autistic children are starseeds that have been taken down.
Okay.
So many of the people who are labeled with mental health issues and put on mind-altering drugs, there's the clue, mind-altering drugs,
okay,
in order to control them. Yeah, I mean, let me tell you a bit about how I was sabotaged. And for me, I mean, I chose my birth parents for a reason, because of their lineage, because of what they were doing and where they were going and things like this was really important to my function on this planet. And so, and I lay money, and I think it is in my mother's line, there was tagging. So she became pregnant. She was being monitored at some level. As my consciousness, there's a point where your consciousness starts to braid into the fetus, and it's like several months before the planned birth date. As my consciousness began that slow braiding in, again, okay, that's a starseed consciousness coming in. What can we do to digress that?
Mm-hmm.
Often it comes in at birth with, as I say, the introduction of the vaccines. You immediately come in this pure soul that immediately starts to get muddied, and then gets further muddied, and then gets further muddied. With me, it was, I don't understand how this happened, and I did talk to my mum about it. She was very reluctant really to talk about all of this. She mentioned a long time ago my birth process, and it really made me sit up. I thought something's wrong with that, in the way that I think I've talked to you about. It's kind of like, that doesn't make sense. Something there doesn't add up. That had me poking into it. But then she really closed down. She sort of withdrew and didn't want to talk about it. But at the time my mother was pregnant with me, my father he worked in London. He worked for BP Oil, the oil company, as an accountant. My father was an accountant, and he got seconded by his company to go out to Kuwait, which was it was very embryonic at that time. We're talking in the 1950s, late 1950s, to go out to Kuwait to join the team that BP Oil had out there, helping the Kuwaitis construct and run their oil industry. So it was, there were a lot of people seconded from existing Western oil companies, and it was part of the West process of basically controlling, managing other countries, the oil producing countries and things like this. So my father was to take up a position out there, but he said, yeah, I'll go. And mum was all up for it. My mum, great, an adventure sort of thing. But not until my wife has had her child. I am not leaving a pregnant wife here to give birth on her own, sell a house with her. And she had my brother at that time. My brother was 18 months old at that time. And he said, I'm not going until my child is born, which my planned birth date, in my soul plan was early November. My mum thought that her due date was somewhere around the 20th of October, maybe. She got the date wrong by about 2 weeks on what my consciousness had planned to come in on. There was a huge pressure put on my father to go out to Kuwait. And as a consequence, the hospital my mum was due to give birth in was Aldershot Hospital, because they lived in Fleet, very near to that. Aldershot is a military town, and it was a military hospital. Somehow, BP, which is not a nice company, run by not nice beings, and the military hospital cooked up, and even now I don't understand, they cooked up, putting pressure on my mother to agree to an early induction.
Okay.
In order, and the excuse was in order to get my dad, they needed my dad to take up, all of a sudden it became very urgent, my dad had to take up his post. But what it meant was, in the 1950s, you would have been bringing a child a month early into that. That's what the consequences. But my mum didn't know that. She thought it was just 2 weeks early, and she'd been told that was no big deal, etc., etc. So she was put under huge pressure and agreed to this induction process. She was taken in. She was induced on a Monday. Didn't work. They put her through the same process again on the Tuesday. And I've been, I've known for years this was wrong, but it was only 18 months ago I was shown what took place before my birth. And it was kind of like I was in, as a consciousness comes in, you've got a team that helps to bring you in. It's a big deal. And you've got a team and you've planned it out and you've planned out the planetary alignments and, you know, where all the supportive energies are that are going to be able to help you do the best you can on your mission here, so that you've got all the support structure you need. My team was there. It was almost like there were klaxons going off because they were trying to get, you know, in the 3D world, they were trying to get this baby out the womb. There were klaxons going off. My consciousness was halfway betwixt and between, partly woven into the fetus, partly not. And it was like abort, abort, abort. And I would have been a stillbirth. And at the very last moment, someone from the team came rushing in and said, we can make it work if we hit this window. There'll be enough, not everything we need for this mission to be successful, but there'll be enough for it to have some effectiveness. So we have this little window here to hit where we've got certain alignments that will be helpful, but it means you get in now. And my consciousness literally, you know, it had 2 seconds to make the decision. I either withdrew or I went forwards. And my consciousness went into the fetus so hard, as I say, it's almost like I had concussion for years. You know, I arrived on the earth plane so quickly and so suddenly. And my mum went from around midday, the induction not working again like it had the previous day. And inductions, I understand, are horribly painful, to, my God, it's happening. The child is coming. And she said to the midwife, you know, the baby's coming, the baby's coming. And it was like lunchtime and the midwife was, oh, you've got hours yet, you've got hours yet. And mum, my head was literally presenting as mum waddled into the delivery room and the midwife was in a panic and tore her gloves. I could remember mum telling me the midwife tore her gloves. And I came out effectively a blue baby and not breathing. And they got me breathing. But they thought I would die. And I was baptized in hospital because they really didn't think I would survive. It affected, as you can imagine, this whole story affected my relationship with my mum. I mean, there was immense guilt and all sorts of things there, but you know, that's a whole nother matter. That was the sabotage. I was meant to be a stillbirth. They were not going to even allow me on the planet, and they found a mechanism for doing that. I found a mechanism through it, but by God, it had a cost attached to it. It had a huge cost attached to it.
That is so fascinating. And I want to thank you so much for such a raw share, because I think that, you know, birth stories are fascinating, the whole thing in themselves. But what you've opened up for me there is, again, that realization around even the birthing process for a starseed is not always straightforward. And there's nothing that we can do on one level about the way that we incarnate.
Yeah.
To know that there would have been on some level a spirit team or a team on our side, and we would have made, like you say, somewhere you made that decision, right, I'm going in,
Yeah,
you know, in you crashed into your own fetus in terms of your consciousness. That kind of thing just really it blows my mind, because it makes me realize just how important it is for us to understand how special it is for us to be on earth.
yeah,
And what we may have had to have overcome at levels that we can't even see.
yeah.
And you know, the work that you've had to do to unpick that with your mother, where it was a very sensitive subject, and all the potential damage, but also all the potential, you know, all the massive obstacles that you overcame to be here. I just want to say thank you. And I feel like, you know, on one level there's more to unpack. It may well, for our listeners, have really got them thinking, oh my God, I wonder how this has impacted, you know, me in my own life. How can they find out more if they have been affected by this story?
Yeah, the kind of sabotage I'm talking about at birth, as I say, that talk to your own mother and see if there's anything like that. I don't think my story is a normal story. The more likely sabotages for starseeds are going to be, huge vaccine damage that results in autism, or being shut down by drugs like, they're diagnosed ADHD and all these, and they're shut down by drugs like that, or labeled with mental health issues at some level. It can be, and I've heard stories of this, where a fallen someone who is owned by a fallen consciousness or of a fallen consciousness befriends or maybe sets up a romantic relationship with an awakening starseed, and basically pulls them into the pit, pulls them totally off course, puts them through huge traumas, emotional traumas and things like that, that shuts them right down again. So that can be, sort of, yeah, I mean, life's traumas, life's catastrophes can be, I mean, one of, another sabotage that I had that happened quite recently, because they'll keep trying to knock you off course if they can, is I had quite a serious fall down the stairs I think it was about 4 years ago now. I just finished or was in the process of finishing an online program that I was doing that was a big leap forward. It was a big leap forward in what I was doing, and it shut me down totally. I had a bad tumble. I pulled all of the ligaments. This was in COVID, during COVID lockup. I pulled all of these, stretched, whatever they call it, tore all of the ligaments in my left foot. But it wasn't just that. It was the shock that went with it. And that's what told me that this was not a normal process, because I was here, and then I was here, and I had no memory of how I went from there to there. And I should have fallen forwards, and I didn't. I felt, I mean, there's a whole lot about it that didn't make sense, but the level of shock, it was like a psychic shock that went through my whole being. And physically, it's like my physical strength just went out of me. And I spent the best part of, well, it took me over 6 months to get properly mobile again, to be able to put weight on that foot. It was a massive struggle, a massive shock to the system, and it set me back. The work I was doing, it took me away from it, because I just wasn't in a state to do it any longer. Now, I got myself the other side of that, and actually it served. There are ways to turn these shadows, as it were, into gold. There's ways to alchemize them, and I managed to do that. And it in some respects, I probably wouldn't be as far advanced with the work I'm now doing if they hadn't put me through that, because it shook something loose. It really shook something loose at a big level. But yeah, traumas, accidents. You can have an accident that makes absolutely no sense. It will take you out.
Okay.
You may feel like, finally, I'm on course. I can see where I'm going. There's my target. Whoosh.
Yeah. So this is fascinating. So what this has done for me is it has made me realize that these seeming nonsensical breakfalls that come out of nowhere when you were just on a roll with something can be starseed sabotage. What that makes me realize is it makes me join the dots and think, right, I'm going to double down even harder. I don't care what they're going to do. Now I know that I'm going to get back on track. I'm not going to make it about me. I did something wrong, which is what a lot of starseeds do. I'm just going to dust myself off, get back on track. I'm going to be very vigilant about narcissistic relationships, toxic friendships, any of the things that are dragging me off course. And I'm going to do everything that I can to safeguard the path of my own truth,
Yeah.
my own alignment, because it sounds to me like if we take the intention to just keep alchemizing everything that's thrown at us, we become, you know, increasingly resilient, increasingly impenetrable, and we actually, oddly, we strengthen through their attempts to sabotage.
Yeah.
So that's my take home from this. I would really love it if people would love to comment on what they took from this, because I'm really mindful that we promised that we would
Yeah.
keep these
Sexual
nice
abuse.
and
I mean, I haven't mentioned that. Again,
Okay.
I had the exposure to that in my childhood. Sexual abuse is another big one as well.
Ah,
Yeah.
this
But
is
yes, you know, there are so many ways that we can be taken off course. But this is the thing about a starseed. I mean, your response to it is, especially once you know that someone is deliberately trying to do it, it's like, bugger you. I'm not letting you get away with that.
there is something deep inside that just says, right, if that's your game, then bring it on. You know,
Yeah,
like I don't think
absolutely. Yeah, 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 yeah. If you think you're stopping me, it ain't happening. Yeah.
Sarah, so helpful. Once again, so illuminative. I've been taking notes, you can probably tell, all the way through. Thank you so much. Can't wait for the next one.
My pleasure. And yeah, we look forward to next time round. Bye, everyone.